All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the ShOUt Show with me, your host, Preacher Moss. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in for the first time, and for those that have seen the show before, I want to tell you I appreciate your support and coming back. It could be other places. You decided to spend your time here with me. Today is a very interesting show. It's going to be a little mix of something I had as a topic and then something that will be inclusive in terms of current events. Today's show is about nuance. When we talk about nuance, nuance is something that you're going to deal with throughout life. It's either going to be your nuance or somebody else's nuance. And I find that it's really interesting in two events that have happened in the last couple of hours. Let me get a welcome, Brother Shamik Shahadat. Thank you for coming, brother. Appreciate you. And Sister Jasmine, all the way from the UK. Thank you for coming. It's interesting that when we talk about nuance in political structure, nuance in social structure has always been based around who's able to frame nuance, what side of it are you on, and it could be the argument about who has and who has not. But I will also encourage us to actually look up the word nuance. The word nuance says in Webster's dictionary, it begins with subtle distinction. Subtle distinction. Now you have to look up the word subtle, which means slight, but subtle distinction in terms of perception, in terms of meaning, in terms of sound, nuance. You nuanced the sound. It sounded slightly differently. But in terms of human capital, the idea of nuance has taken on an incredibly weird turn, if you will. When I say weird turn, I mean that it's not being applied the way you would think. Two situations that have come up. If you read the bottom of the screen, it says peace and condolences to the family of George Floyd. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Floyd was in Minneapolis. He was detained by Minneapolis police on a charge of forgery in progress. There's a tape that's out there. I would suggest you actually don't take it from me, because I can be giving you a nuanced description. Thank you for coming, Sister Safia. Appreciate you. There's a tape of this man on the ground, handcuffed back behind him, and there's a policeman with his knee on his neck for a period that had to be over 3.5, 4 minutes. Quote unquote, they were calling the ambulance, but he had his knee on his neck to the point when the man started talking, saying, "I can't breathe, get me some water, there's something wrong with my stomach," crying out for his mother. I mean, it's horrific to watch. Horrific to and watching it from my vantage point, which is a computer screen, it makes it even more difficult because you have actually people on the ground. I mean, this is brazen. People are saying that you're killing him. There are people with camera phones taping the whole thing. That's the only way I get to see it, to brothers and sisters. And it was interesting that the cop had no emotion. He had no emotion, he had no feeling. And this guy, essentially, I think he died on the ground. In fact, it was even more embarrassing that he was not breathing when the paramedics came and they lifted him up on the gurney, still handcuffed. I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled because being a black man in the United States, I realized that my mother, and my grandmother, and my father, and my grandfather spoke to me about nuance, but it wasn't nuance about dealing with subtle things. It was nuance dealing with the opposite of not having nuance, brothers and sisters, is none. There's no in between. We either have, you understand, being subtle and not subtle. Those are the only two things that you have. And we have been programmed, legislated for a lot of years to accept nuance from other people without being able to implicate or inject nuance in our own situations. What I mean and what I'm going to expand on here is the second case. The second case is in New York City, Central Park. A man named Christian Cooper was a bird watcher, okay? He's a bird watcher. In the video, there's a woman, white woman. Let's just put it out there. Christian Cooper is black, white woman. She has her dog in this area where you're not supposed to have dogs. But more importantly, he asked the woman to at least have the dog on a leash because the dog was tearing up the ramble, which is important because for bird watchers, that's what the birds come to land and they can view the birds. The woman is belligerent. She doesn't do it. I think she puts the dog on the leash at some point in time, takes him off the leash. He's filming her. She becomes belligerent. Stop filming me. Okay, that's a normal argument. Okay? That's a normal argument. This is where it goes off the track, though. She gets on the phone and says, "You don't stop calling me, I'm going to call the police." Lack of nuance. Not subtle. She says, "I'm going to call the police," but she calls the police, and you have to watch the videotape. She calls the police, and she says to the police, "There is a black man here that's threatening me and my dog. There's a black man here in the ramble at Central Park threatening me and my dog. Come immediately." No nuance. Not at all. Urgency, deception, no nuance, no truth. See, the fact is, you can't really have nuance with the truth. If you try to nuance the truth, most likely you're lying. In this case, she was lying. In the case of George Floyd, he's not here to give his case. He's not here to tell you why he got arrested. Furthermore, he's not here to tell you why he got killed. In the world of creativity, we live and die by nuance. Being able to take something that looks a certain way and just twist it a little bit to give it a different type of meaning. That's in art. That's in culture. What I'm seeing now is, and if this tape does not happen with Mr. George Floyd, there would have been a lot of stories that were different than what we saw in the videotape. You remember Eric Garner of New York City being arrested for contraband cigarettes. Now, what's interesting is the man clearly yells, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Much the same as Mr. Floyd is yelling, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." In that scenario, you don't need nuance. You need the truth. You need compassion. In no other place are you going to see this. Now, I don't want to get on the race thing, but I'm already on the race. I'm a black man in America. I don't even know why people go, "Oh, you're going to play the race card." I'm black in America. That is the race card. And for the most part, it lacks nuance unless it comes from black people. If you are Latino, the argument for immigration in the United States is not nuanced unless it comes from Mexican Americans. Same thing with women. Same thing with the poor. What am I saying? It means that the whole idea has been packaged right now. I have come to understand, and I really don't even like to talk about COVID-19 because COVID-19 has a lack of nuance from the people who are making decisions, which means that people in and of themselves have to figure out the subtleties of their own life based against the people who are supposed to be protecting them and leading us. This is nothing new. This is nothing new. I had a conversation with Dr. Yvonne Sufjan. She's like my other mother. And we were talking. She's 81 years old. God bless her. She's 81 years old. It was interesting because we talked about her mother, her grandparents, her great-grandparents. And I was talking about mine, and I said, these are people who lived with no nuance in society. They did things that were amazing. They did things that were astounding. They worked jobs from sun up to sundown. My grandfather, prime example, he worked a job from sun up to sundown, 2 jobs, in fact, with the understanding that even with the 2 jobs, he wasn't going to make enough to support his family in most cases. If you really start looking at it, I want to say maybe that nuance is in the hands of the people who serve creation, not the people that serve their own creation, or not the people that think they are the creation, for lack of a better word. Taking this whole idea of nuance, and I had a whole nother show planned, but we apply it to life. We apply it to life, or I'm going to apply it to life, meaning that I have thoughts about how we're going to get out of particular situations, financial situations. A lot of people look at financial situations through the prism of someone is employing you, not the fact that you have skills that are seen or perceived as being valuable. Nuance. Our health situation, if you will. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Thank you for coming. We're talking about nuance. We're talking about Brother Floyd up in Minneapolis that was killed by the Minneapolis police. Go to the videotape. But I'm talking about how we look at ourselves as a family. I think the interesting thing with family is that there's so many distractions with the family that the family never really grows a group understanding, almost like a herd immunity about how we expand and how we grow, how we protect ourselves. The idea of modern families is fragmented. The idea of the modern family is almost like the show Modern Families. We can't show you a consistent family all the way through, but what we can show you is snippets of all these different families in situations and scenarios that we think might be entertaining for you. That's not real family. If we're going to look further, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Sister Aika, all the way from Indonesia. Shout out to you. But let me further expand this. We're in a situation where nuance has been replaced in many regards with anxiety. So right now we're one of the most anxiety-riddled countries in the world. This is one of the most mentally unhealthy times in the world. And here's the deal. Don't blame it on COVID-19. Don't blame it on COVID-19. COVID-19, outside of the deaths, is somewhat of a blessing for people because we have gotten away from looking at nuance, how we perceive things, the subtle distinctions, how people give a story. I remember talking about journalism before, sometime about writing. And I said, you have to understand writing, that the news that you see today, you have to understand the history of writing, the history of journalism. When I was a journalism student, they taught you, as a rule, to write for every genre. Newspaper, print, radio, TV. They taught you how to write press releases. They taught you how to write marketing, advertising. You would do all these things because they wanted to make sure that you had an identity or a connection with all these things that would be connected with people. Right now, we are in an identity crisis in the context that folks have lost the ability, or in some cases, the will to establish nuance when they deal with other folks. That's why you'll have situations where in but Michigan, where people say, we don't want a shelter in place. All right, but why do you bring a gun when your argument is about, I don't want to stay home? Is it you don't want to stay home, or you want to go out and make some kind of statement? And this argument, and the killer part is, nobody can really tell you to stay home. You can go wherever you want to, but you're protesting. You have to find an argument. You have to find a group of people that are like you. We call that the wisdom of the crowd. You have to find a group of people that like you. In some regards, the wisdom is not that wise, but because there's a group, we mistake that for consensus. I would like to back up for a moment. His sister, Sakina Mujahid, she is a former Minneapolis resident, and I'm sure she has already heard about this brother, George Floyd, killed by the police. And I do say killed by the police. It's not allegedly, okay? I'm not going to go allegedly. I saw the tape. You killed that man. One of the things that are out there these days is the fact that, to me, in large regard, police don't have nuance. We don't have community policing anymore, or effective community policing the way we used to. So when the police show up, it's a crisis mode. And in their mind, it's like, I can't talk about it in their mind. I don't want to say that. But there is a thing where we are the law, and the law can do whatever they want to. No, the law can't do everything you want to because it's not your law. Your job as a police officer is to make sure the law is applied equally. And I mean not just equally, but also in a space where the law promotes the good, even in the worst situations. I have really tried to look beyond this. I know I had a show about Brother Ahmaud Arbery, and I was emotional. Admittedly, I was emotional because I was frustrated. I was frustrated. As a black man, I said one of the toughest things about being black in the United States is wherever you go, wherever you do, there is this cloud by white supremacy that says you have to ask us permission to exist. You gotta ask for permission to exist. And I'm like, that's criminal. Anybody that does that should be locked up. You're asking me permission to, even God doesn't ask you permission. He doesn't require your permission. He doesn't ask. You don't even have to ask God for permission to exist. Why do I have to do this individual? Watch that tape. Watch Mr. Floyd. He's asking permission to live. I can't breathe. Give me some water. Everything hurts. Okay? Breathing, everything. I can't breathe. Everything hurts. Give me some water. The man essentially passes out. He's not even permitted in a quest or a query or even just a basic cry out for his own life to interject his own nuance. He can't even say, I'd like a little water. That's the way nuance works. You know what? My neck hurts a little. It wasn't subtle. There was no subtlety. When you're crying out for help or you're fighting for your life, there's no subtlety. Thus, there's no nuance. Subtlety and nuance go together. In this situation, there's neither one. If you're going to watch the tape with Mr. Christian Cooper in New York City, now he wasn't killed by the police, but this woman, this white woman I had, who was fired, by the way, from her job. She was on leave and then they fired her. But this is a woman who took it upon herself to talk to the police and describe a situation that was totally absent of the truth, any subtlety, in nuance, and the police showed up anyway, even though the people had already left. They left, okay? But had that man been there, I think it would have been a different story. These are the things that hold us back as a society. We talk about fairness, and, we always say perspective. I want to say, hey, we have the benefit in a lot of regards for nuance because we have cell phones and we have social media and we can get this stuff. But, when I think of our forefathers, they had none of that. None of it. And even then, they didn't have none of it, but they were extremely effective. So what I would hope, as we talk about Mr. George Floyd, who I didn't plan to talk about until I watched the tape again, because things move within you, brothers and sisters. Things move within you. Your heart is stirred. When I watched that video, I had to get myself together because as a human being, I'm engaged in human condition. I'm watching a man die. A forgery in progress. I don't even know what that means. They took him out of his car. When he got out of his house this morning, do you think he would wind up dead? Is those the thoughts anybody has? We know it's possible. Hey, we can go anytime, our health or natural disasters or whatever. But really, to watch it on screen, I was going to put it on there, but I thought it'd be too disturbing. To watch it on screen, to live a life where you're not afforded nuance, where you're not afforded an opportunity to be effective in your description of what happened to you and how you're trying to live your life. If you ever go to court, that's interesting. You ever have to go to court? The court is stripped down. And what they don't allow for is nuance. They used to call it extenuating circumstances. But even now, that's being legislated away. Had a camera not been there with Mr. Floyd, how would that story been reported? Had Mr. Christian Cooper not had his cell phone to tape a woman who was taping him, he taped a woman calling the police on him. How would we react? Are we a society that is quickly moving to nuance? I mean, moving forward without nuance. I think about it. And this is the big one. We not hired, he was elected president. But this is the first president that I can say thoroughly disrespects, denies, and without subtlety has no nuance. That's the leader of the country. You know the people that don't have nuance? Liars, racists, situations that don't have nuance. Poverty, illiteracy, sexism, racism. These are things that don't have nuance. And when you start beginning to play this out just a little bit, and I'm going to shout Mary Moss out because my mom and I were talking about this earlier today. Just how people had to live their lives with dignity when folks attacked them or treated them with no nuance. I mean, yes, Doug Robinson, you are right. It's 2:00. For people that want to know about 2:00, you're going to have to go back. Doug Robinson is correct. It is 2:00 because we're in an age whereby it is so routine to see people not treated with nuance, or a group of people that deny it to folks. It's interesting because what's the story? Are you really having a true discussion? There was a situation, a scenario whereby I'm sitting with somebody knowing that we can't nuance the situation. I can. This person could not. And I don't blame it on anything, but it was the idea that to have any kind of compromise, to invite in any kind of information other than what I'm telling you, which in my mind has to be 100% correct. And to be something for something to be 100% correct, you have to be 100% wrong. Is the balance. You can't have these things. What do we say? The little interstitial. You can't have them. My point is, today we finally reached 100,000 deaths as a part of this COVID virus. 100,000 deaths as part of this COVID virus. What's up, Sister Reed? The interesting thing is, I'll never know, we'll never know how many people those died, how many people who died could have been saved, could still be living, could still be taking in breath today with the application of nuance. Words like I don't know. Words like I'm sorry. Words like I'll do better. Words like, you know what, let me be more active. Words like let me be more sympathetic. Let me be more empathetic. These are words that are missing. These are the words that normally have to do with creative process, if you will. The greatest creative process is the creative going, you know what, I don't know, but I'm willing to invest to find out. How many cures started out with that? How many arguments, disagreements started? How many families have been broken up because of a lack of nuance? I mean, it's crazy, but it stirs the soul because I'm a living individual. I'm connected to people. That's a part of my job. I realize that as a wordsmith on stage, nuance has everything to do with a joke, how I said it, what words I use. It's a difference between being a killer joke and hilarious to being something where you seriously damage the heart of people. Am I sensitive about these things? Absolutely. I care about people. So as we wrap up, folks, remember, in your mind, in your lives, just look at the definition of nuance. Subtle distinction. Subtle distinction. The little things. Almost not even tangible. You can barely see them, but they're the little things that make all the difference in the world. could have made the difference between Mr. George Floyd being here as opposed to being deceased? What if somebody got him a little water? What if the police officer took his knee off his neck after 4 minutes? What if they just stood him up against the car? I mean, hell, he was already unconscious. You watched a man yell and plead for his life all the way to the point he got quiet. Well, it's quiet, but you know what? We're listening. Sister Sophia, you're right. Yeah. I meant to say that the 4 officers that were involved, all of them were fired. I watched a press conference with Brother Keith Ellison, who's the AG of Minnesota, and he said something: you can't heal a dirty wound. Let me say that again. He said, you cannot heal a dirty wound. And so the absence of nuance in this case is claimed yet another life. I don't know Mr. George Floyd, the same way I didn't know Ahmaud Arbery. But you know what the eerie thing about it is? I come to know these guys, how? Off of camera phones. Listen, I really have to. I gotta go because I'm really in a place where I can't. I question the brutality, the lack of mercy, and I can't. There's really nowhere to go with this because it happens so often. It's like a bad for all those old folks people here on the show, like Jabril and Doug and my mom. I mean, it's like a really bad reoccurring movie of the week. Remember, you have a movie of the week. It's almost like the murder of the week, and it just happens to be the same situation. People in oppressive scenarios trying to exert oppression over and over and over and over. Yeah. Thank you, Jabril. I appreciate it. So for this show, I'm going to ask all you brothers and sisters to pray for the family of Mr. George Floyd. No, I didn't know him. I don't know if he was in the commission of a crime. I don't know. All I know was I saw a human being on the ground with the officer with his knee on his neck, and I saw the pain and the anguish of this man who cried out for help, who cried out for jail. I mean, oh, here it is right here. It's something. Yes, 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 yes. Another movie of the week. I will watch Democracy Now! And I'm going to go find this video of Brother Sergeant James Brown. He's a guy. Memorial Day was just yesterday. Here we are again. So listen, I'm going to get off. I normally try and keep it at 25 minutes, but this was a little bit different. The show was supposed to be about nuance and creativity. I want to thank my grandmother and my mom and my parents because, they taught me nuance, not in terms of creativity, but they taught me nuance in terms of survival. And by Lord's grace, I'm still here. But it doesn't make this situation any better. I'm Preacher Mars on the ShOUt show. I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully the topic can be a little bit more brighter. But like I said, these are real times. So take care of yourself. Inshallah, I'll see you soon.